I want to talk to you about a subject that I've spent really much of my life studying, and that's the Supreme Court of the United States. You know, when people rely on the court, they're relying on people who in many ways are highly political and highly partisan. Some of them are able to control themselves, and they have a philosophical approach to interpreting the Constitution that comports with their obligation to uphold it and defend it. But most are not. And you can see much of that in the history of the court. There are 3 justices today who comported themselves with great honor, who have respect for the rule of law and respect for you. Just 3 out of the 9. In those 3, the great Clarence Thomas, thank God for Clarence Thomas, the great Sam Alito, who has been absolutely exceptional, and Neil Gorsuch, who's either really, really good or not, but not Kavanaugh and not Coney. Now, what am I talking about here? This is how Reuters puts it. U.S. Supreme Court formally pulls the plug on election-related cases. The U.S. Supreme Court on Monday brought a formal end to 8 lingering disputes pursued by former President Donald Trump and his allies related to the election. The justices turned away appeals by the Republican Party of Pennsylvania and Republican members of the state legislature of a ruling by Pennsylvania's top court ordering officials to count mail-in ballots that were postmarked by Election Day and received up to 3 days later. They did more than that. They eliminated the signature requirement and other requirements. 3 of the 9 members on the court, 6 conservative justices, well, that is a lie, and they'll continue to do that in the media because it serves their narrative. Clarence Thomas, Samuel Alito, and Neil Gorsuch dissented from the decision not to hear the Pennsylvania case. The High Court, as expected, also rejected 2 Trump appeals challenging Biden's victories in Pennsylvania and Wisconsin, based on claims that the rules for mail-in ballots in the 2 election battleground states were invalid. The court also turned away separate cases brought by Trump allies in Pennsylvania, Michigan, Georgia, Arizona, all states won by Biden. And then they say Trump made false claims and so forth. Well, how do they know Trump made false claims? The court won't hear it. This court won't hear him either. Why do the media report this way? Anyway, on the Pennsylvania case, I happen to be familiar with both of them. The one to me that was the strongest of the cases was the one that was a straight-up challenge under Article 2, Section 1, Clause 2 of the Constitution, which is very simple. That is that the Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, the Attorney General of Pennsylvania, and the Secretary of State of Pennsylvania have absolutely no authority to substantively change election laws in the state. Yet that's precisely what they did. Now, that's not the way it's explained by Reuters or AP or any other news organizations, but that's exactly what they did. Now, you have 3 justices who wanted to hear that case, 6 who did not. So what happens next cycle, which is exactly the point of the dissent? We're going to be right back here again because this wasn't resolved. And I can guarantee you that the leader of this sort of rogue effort is the Chief Justice of the United States, John Roberts. But the fact that Coney and Kavanaugh joined with Roberts and the leftists on the court is appalling. What is the use of the Supreme Court? It gets involved in every damn thing imaginable. Every cultural issue has to be run by the Supreme Court, whether it's abortion or prayer, whether it's nativity scenes, whether it's marriage. Every single cultural issue is run by the Supreme Court. Why? All they are lawyers. Why do they control what happens in every state, in every town, and in every public square? But here we have something that occurred under the federal Constitution, where the framers could not have been clear. The state legislators, even John Roberts should be able to read that. But 6 of them, including Kavanaugh and Coney, the great Kavanaugh and the great Coney, decided not to get involved. Shame on them. They have helped to pour fuel on the fire of the division in this country by failing to uphold the United States Constitution and drawing a line. That's their damn job, not to interfere in all these other matters. Now, the second Pennsylvania case, which is straightforward, black and white, simple as can be. The Pennsylvania state legislature, Republican, and the Democrat governor conspired to violate their own constitution. Now, you might say, what's that have to do with the federal government? Nothing, except it involves the selection of electors who choose the president and vice president of the United States. So it has everything to do with the federal Constitution. It's not a federalism issue. In other words, state legislatures are free to conduct themselves as they wish within the civil rights requirements and so forth. But they're not free to violate their own Constitution in order to create a situation where you have tainted electors being counted in Washington, D.C. on the day those electors are counted. So they disenfranchise the people in Pennsylvania by not actually amending the Constitution, by effectively passing a statute in lieu of an amendment that allowed for mail-in voting. And they felt pressure to do it because of the pandemic. We're destroying our country based on this pandemic. You understand, the left is running right through it. That was a simple up and down case. And the state Supreme Court of Pennsylvania, with a variety of outrageous tricks, wouldn't even hear it. The appellate court in Pennsylvania, this appellate judge, she was fantastic and courageous. She said, yes, I'm going to hear this case because the plaintiffs in this case make a very serious argument that our state constitution was violated and that it taints and has an effect on the federal constitutional process. She was shut down in 72 hours by a partisan elected state Supreme Court. Shut down. And then they shut down the petitioners. They made it impossible for the petitioners to even have their day in the state Supreme Court, and now they don't get their day in the federal Supreme Court. So there's your court system, ladies and gentlemen. What a crock. What a joke. Good job, John Roberts. Those were the two most important cases because they specifically addressed the federal constitutional system, which was violated in Pennsylvania, which was violated in Wisconsin, which was violated in Georgia, which was violated in Michigan, and frankly, was violated in Arizona. And so now what? And so now guess what, ladies and gentlemen? The Democrats are going to feel that they can do whatever the hell they want in these states. And they're going to go back into these states, and they're going to push an agenda even further to make it absolutely impossible to win the states. In other words, your United States Supreme Court rewrote the federal Constitution of the United States by not acting because it allowed these rogue actors, all Democrats, except in the one instance in Pennsylvania with the Republican legislature, allowed them to change the language effectively, practically, in terms of implementation under the federal Constitution. Your federal Constitution was changed in the last election. I don't give a damn what the New York Times, the Washington Post, Dominion this, that. I don't care what any of them say. I'm not even addressing fraud. I'm addressing a crooked system, systematic violations of our constitutional system. And there they are, 6 of the 9 justices, sitting on their asses, doing not a damn thing about it, because they're afraid of what will be said about them in the editorial pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post. Cowards, absolute cowards.